Welcome to Keep the Line Moving, the podcast where leadership meets life and inspiration. Here we spotlight extraordinary leaders. We're diving deep into how they inspire, motivate, and lead with strategy and empathy to achieve the extraordinary. Here we go. Episode 138 of the podcast, and our topic is mindset before skill set. That's right. Let that sink in. This conversation is a fascinating one with our guest, Kevin Eikenberry. He is, I love this title, Chief Potential Officer at the Kevin Eikenberry Group. 32 years he's been at it, leadership development. He's the founder, owner, and leader of the great team that makes up the Kevin Eikenberry Group. And as he writes in his LinkedIn, he spends his days writing, speaking, coaching, consulting, and training, all meant to help leaders make a bigger difference in the world around them. He has a book which came out in late March of this year called Flexible Leadership, Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. We talk about that and so much more. We get into the nitty-gritty of leadership development through the eyes of somebody who's been doing it a very long time. He has his own podcast. It's called the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, with nearly 500 guests since 2016. And also, twice he has been named theinc.com as one of the top 100 leadership and management experts in the world and 100 great leadership speakers for your next conference. The American Management Association named him Leaders to Watch, and he has twice been named one of the world's top 30 leadership professionals. I can go on, but let's get to Kevin right now on Keep the Line Moving. All right, Kevin, you were born in Michigan, raised in Michigan. Tell me your background. Here's why, because people that do what we do for a living, I'm always fascinated about how they got there. So how did you get here? Start with Michigan, my friend.
I grew up on a farm in Michigan, which is a seminal, I think all of our kidhoods are seminal experiences. I think I wouldn't trade mine for anything. Growing up on a farm with another related agricultural business led me to have opportunities to not only observe leadership in my father and others. Like, I went everywhere with him, right? I went on sales calls with him when I was a kid. I knew all of the farmers. I knew all of our customers. I had the chance to make decisions and lead others. I think there's something about growing up on a farm to start with, and then you add just sort of the nature of my situation makes it all the more powerful. And I'm informed every day by what I learned during that time in my life.
What type of leader was your dad?
My dad was like every other leader on the planet, kind of messy. But my dad was very customer focused, and that's a good thing to learn from. He was very sort of community focused. But, I think one of the greatest things I learned from my dad was, especially as I got a little older, if you made a mistake, you heard about it, but you only heard about it once. I think there's a big lesson there too.
So obviously our parents and anybody who raises us frames the way we see the world, perspective, but it also frames the way, as you said, as you lead. So as you became a leader, and there's no formal, you know this, you do this for a living, you've been doing it longer than I have, which is that we are always leading, right? There's segments of our lives where we have more of a leadership role, formally or not, parenting or coaching or teaching, of all those, areas of life that most of us go through. Right. So, but when you became a formal leader, what type of leader were you?
Well, I don't like to use labels, because I think once we use labels, those things become identities, and those identities then lock us in and keep us from being flexible, which is a lot of the work that we're doing now. So I do have tendencies, just like every other human being, right? And my tendencies are I'm more extroverted than some, but not as extroverted as some people who know me think. I'm pretty good, generally speaking, at influencing others in a variety of ways. And so I think that has informed my leadership role. And I think I've generally been pretty good at being able to balance between the big picture and the details, which I think sometimes leaders have a challenge with.
That's good. Yeah, and I agree with you on labeling and being flexible and all. I guess where I was going with it, we all have values, and values shape the way we see ourselves. And right, it's all part of, as you know, because the wonderful work that you do, introspection allows us to share those
Yeah.
values and share why we are maybe more introverted or extroverted. And, and it's all a hypothesis, Kevin, right? Because we're constantly evolving, to your point.
Our values are critically important because while I talk a lot about being a flexible leader,
Yes.
there are things that we don't flex, and our values are one of those things, part of the roots, if you will, of our tree. If we consider ourselves like a tree, a tree is both consistent and stable and flexible. And I believe as humans, as leaders, we need to be the same. And while a tree has roots, we have roots, and one of those roots is our values.
All right. So in 1993, you made the transition, and I'll have you say it, right, from corporate to what you're doing now. But I'm sure there's more complexity to the story. Please feel free to go to any direction you might, because I'd love to know the origin story of folks that do what we do, which is to focus on helping others be the best they can be.
I sort of always knew that I would have that I would start a company I would be a business owner. And so I went to work for Chevron, wasn't looking for a job at that time, went to work for Chevron and in a sales role and eventually in a training and development role. And it was when I got into the training and development world is when I figured out that this is what I was put on the planet to do. And it was from there that led me to strike out on my own and start my own company. And that was almost 32 years ago.
Kevin, what was it about being in that training and development role at Chevron that sparked your, inner passion, and see that just what you said, that you can connect the dots here early on in your career and say, this is where I am meant to be?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and one is that another one of my another one of my values is around learning, and so I got into a place where I was helping to facilitate the learning of others, and that was very exciting to me, and it allowed me to see how the work that I could do could have a ripple effect more broadly, and eventually, as I left to do training and consulting work, I continued to be drawn more and more toward leadership. And that goes back to this leverage point, right? Like if we can help leaders get better, we improve teams, we improve the lives for the team members, we improve the organization, and eventually we improve the world. So to me, leadership is a leverage point. And the other thing that excites me about teaching leadership is that as I wrote in one of my books, something along the lines of, as we become a better leader, we become a better human, and vice versa. Like the linkage between who we are and who we are as a leader is so interconnected that, because what I found was that where I was at my best was teaching things that were both personal and professional development hooked together.
So, as you know, we pay attention, right, when we're teaching, right? And, I teach formally in the university level, and I do
Yep.
workshops like you, which is when we're teaching, we're always paying attention to the subject, right? The students, the workshop participants, one on one clients, and you read their body language. How are they taking this information? Do I need to back off a little bit? Do I need to lean in? Do I need to go in a different direction? I'm losing them. They're looking down at their phone, or they're not taking notes, whatever the case may be. I'm going to throw this on the professor right now. When you talk about leadership, you elevate. You got more excited. Your voice went up in a good way. It's really interesting to see that in you, talking about a better leader, right? Makes a better person. A better person makes a better leader. That is incredible. Did you notice that process in yourself throughout the almost 32 years and your evolution as someone who's teaching this very complex topic?
Well, when I think about my skill as a trainer or facilitator or coach 32 years ago when I started compared to now, I don't really like to think about that, except that that's part of the development, right? And so
Sure.
that's a critically important piece of this puzzle. If you're doing the work you were put on the planet to do, which I truly believe I'm doing, and I feel very blessed that I can say that, it forces, in a way, informs you in another way to stay on that growth path. And so that's what I've tried to continue to do, is just stay on that growth path.
I love that. Tell us some of your success stories over the years, the transformations that you've caused in people to do what they really want to do, which is get the most out of their abilities as leaders.
Well, we're fortunate to have had a lot of leaders say that, we've made a big difference for their organizations, for them as individual leaders. They're, whether it's people that we're coaching, that, when you've written books, those have the broadest reach, but often the least impact, right? So if you think about it, like, I can only coach so many people, but presumably I could have greater impact on those fewer people. On the other end of that spectrum is speaking and then writing, where you might have some impact on lots of people, but generally speaking, less of that impact. So I think one of the things that we've been very fortunate to say is to hear is that people say that my writing, whether it's in one of our books or in my newsletter that we've had for 1,500 episodes or whatever, or issues, that that things that I've written, or perspectives that I've shared, or maybe more importantly, the way I've shared them has had an impact on people, help them see their work differently, help them see their lives differently. And oftentimes, one of the best things that people will say at the end of a workshop is, I didn't just learn about leadership, but I learned how to be a better parent, how to be a better spouse. And that's not what we were teaching. And yet, if I know that if people make those connections, the chances that they will apply what they learned goes way up. And that's ultimately what we want people to do, is to apply what they learned, whether they learned it by reading, watching, listening to a podcast, or, reading a book.
Take
Okay.
us behind the scenes to how you start a workshop. You're going into a corporation. You have a sea of 35 people, maybe senior leaders coupled with, executives of different kinds. Tell us how you start. How do you set the tone?
What most people want to do is immediately dive into skill. And what I feel we have to do first is start with mindset before skill set, because the mindset has to match the skill set. If it doesn't, I can teach you a skill, but if you don't think it matches what you believe, or if you don't believe it will be helpful to you, then you won't ever transfer the skill into a habit. So we think very clearly about the idea of mindset, skill set, and habit set. And so I want people to walk into a workshop and enter a leadership learning laboratory, which means that my first goal is to help them start to think about leadership maybe in new ways, but certainly to have them interacting with others in the room in valuable ways, because all of the learning can't come from Kevin. If it does, I have failed. And it doesn't matter whether I'm talking with senior executives with lots of experience, or I'm talking with frontline leaders who may have less leadership experience, or even if I have a group that spans, right, from brand new frontline first time leader all the way up to senior executive. What I want to do is create a learning environment that allows people to interact, to engage, and with each other as well as with me. And so that's always where I'm going to start. And you might look at it from the outside and think, well, he's not getting down to business soon enough. And yet it all depends on how you define business. Because from my perspective, everything I've done from when people are walking in and I'm saying hello has all been intentional.
So I was on a call yesterday in an unrelated, but a conference I'm going to go to in a few weeks here, Kevin. And the organizer, who's a dear friend of mine, and she's amazing. She said, we only have 35 minutes to get them to do something, to feel something, to walk away with a tangible skill. Kevin, if you had that same restriction that and you said everything you do is with intention, but if you had 35 minutes, I want to help people who are listening, because all of your wonderful experience in your books, which we're going to get to in a minute here. If you were to just have 35 minutes, what would be that takeaway? What would you get them to do in a short amount of time? Which was not my question, which was very long-winded, but go ahead, my friend.
If I've got 35 minutes, I'm going to spend the first 10 minutes, at least 5 minutes, making sure that they see why this is useful for them. Because once people understand why whatever this skill is useful for them, then we have the chance for the teachable moment. Until then, we're just talking to them or lecturing to them, or worst case, showing them PowerPoint slides.
And that's a perfect segue. Listen, everybody, to Kevin's book that came out in late March of this year, Flexible Leadership, Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. I want to know, dive into, again, putting you on the spot, but you can handle it. This is tremendous. Give us the tangible nugget for folks that are listening and wanting something as a result of our visit here today.
Sometime in your life, you've taken some sort of assessment, you've taken some sort of course, which helped you determine what your leadership style was, what your letters, colors, type, strengths were. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things until humans get a hold of them and we start to use them in ways that they were never truly meant to be used, which was to take them from being a way to help us understand our world and becoming a way that we define our world. Earlier, you asked me about what kind of leader I am, and I said I try not to use words because I don't want those to be my identity. But that's what happens. We take Myers-Briggs, we take the Enneagram, we take a Strength Finder, we take I am a facilitative leader. I am a decisive leader. Whatever all of those things are. Once we make those our identity, it makes it extraordinarily difficult for us to flex. And my belief is that in order for us to lead in times of complexity and uncertainty, of which there is more now than there has been in our lives, we have to be able to flex. The reality is that while we should be rooted in our values and in our purpose and the principles of human behavior, how we lead must change based on context. And this book talks about understanding that intention, understanding how we look at context of situations more effectively and completely and more realistically. And then how do we flex across a variety of levers? How do we flex given those first two things? So flexible leadership is about intention plus context plus what we call flexors.
What do you do, Kevin, when someone reads your book, goes through your workshop, or is an individual client of yours, and I ask this question a lot because it's where my mind goes, because I want to fast forward, taking out all the beautiful work that's done in between, that they don't understand that why do I need to, here's what they would say. Why do I need to be flexible? I know how to lead. It's worked for me before. It worked for me 10 years ago. It worked for me during the pandemic. In their minds, what do you do in those circumstances, Kevin, that the folks that are not flexible and not navigating uncertainty and leading with confidence, going back to your book?
Well, I think that if people truly believe that I don't have a problem here, right? Like this is how I lead, and people just have to go with that because you better accept it because this is how I lead. If that's where someone is, then this work isn't going to help them, right? Because this work is saying, I can tell you right now that you could be a more effective leader than you are. However good you are, you could be better. And your team and your organization needs you to be better. Because in a world that's more complex than ever, we can't stand still. And so, but if someone's mind is, that's where I am and I'm fine, if there's no dissatisfaction with the current state, ain't nothing going to change. For any of us ever, not just on this, but on anything else. If there's no dissatisfaction, there's not going to be any choice to change. So if that's really where someone is, then if there's a 360 to finish the question, to answer the question that you gave me, then I'm hoping that the 360 will show them some areas that perhaps they're doing really well, and they need to recognize those. But they also, hopefully it will show them some things where maybe things aren't quite as rosy as they thought. And if they won't see it from their 360, maybe they can see it from their business results. Or if they can't see it from their business results, maybe they can see it from the level of attrition that they have on their team. Or the number of people that want to leave their team and go to another part of the organization. And so ultimately, a leader needs to see that what I'm doing is less than optimal. And so then I need to start to make some sort of change, whether it's around the idea of flexible leadership or any of 100 other concepts. Without a sense of dissatisfaction with the current state and a picture of what you want and a why that matters, nothing's going to change.
What's your advice to them? What can they do tomorrow to help themselves in their workplaces?
What they can do right now is to listen to that feeling. And what they can do tomorrow is they can start asking for feedback. And they can say, hey, I really want you to tell me how I'm doing. And you may not get that feedback immediately, certainly not from your team, especially if your approach has been one that's kept them from feeling safe to share. But you can certainly get feedback from, we can do a 360. We can't do that tomorrow, but you can emulate the 360 by asking your peers, by asking your team, by asking your boss, by asking your customers, hey, how am I doing? But also by just reflecting on what's happening, right? How did that meeting go yesterday? And did that go the way you wanted it to go? How would others say that meeting went? Did they feel like they had input and agency? Do they feel empowered? Are they willing to take accountability? And if you don't like any of your answers to those questions, then the question is, well, what would I do differently next time that might start to change that, move that needle in a new direction?
We're going to all-star moments now. Are you ready for that?
Well, I'm sitting down.
That's good, Kevin.
Notice that wasn't an answer, really. But yeah, I'm as ready as I'm going to be. I have no idea what you're going to ask, so let's go.
No, you do not. We will get to all-star moments in just a second. To grow as a leader, you must make intentional choices about how you want to show up for yourself and your team. Are you ready to grow your leadership? The Gargano Leadership Group offers expert coaching, consulting, and workshops rooted in our 4 leadership pillars: curiosity, alignment, optimism, and self-awareness. Leadership starts with forging authentic connections, communicating your values, leading with energy and enthusiasm, and truly understanding yourself. Visit garganoleadership.com to get started with us today. Back to the show. I'm going to start with a doozy. Your podcast is called the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Nearly 500 guests since 2016. We went over that. Now I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me your most memorable guest interview. Who is that person? Why is it memorable?
Tom Peters. Tom Peters was on my show twice. The first time I was having the chance to interview one of my mentors from afar that I had been reading and observing my entire career. And he treated me like an equal from the first moment. And I had the chance to have a second conversation with him. And I believe it was the last podcast he did before he retired.
So you've been on a lot of podcasts. And aside from this one today that you're enjoying immensely, who have you gone on? What podcast have you gone on and said, wow, I really enjoyed the thoughtful nature of that. That was pretty good.
I'm going to say that one of them is Patrick Thien, Thean. His company is called Rhythm Systems, but I can't remember what the podcast is called. But I would also say Minter Dial, and I think it's called Minter Dialogue is the name of his show, would be another one that would be on that list.
The most effective leader in the public space today, sports, politics, news, whatever, corporate. Who comes to mind when you think of a great leader that we all can see, right? Hopefully it's somebody that's well known.
Well, the first name that comes to my mind is someone who's now retired for about a year or a couple of years now. He was the governor of Indiana. He worked in President Reagan's White House. He was an executive at Eli Lilly, and he was the president at my beloved Purdue University, and that's Mitch Daniels.
What's our number one leadership challenge today that we're facing in, let's just keep it, in the U.S.?
On the big stage, it's uncertainty, which we've talked a little bit about. On the interpersonal stage, it's remembering that it's not about us, that leadership is about outcomes and others, and it's not about us.
That's the mic drop moment right there. I so appreciate that thought process. I say that all the time. I said it to my students last night as we closed the semester at NYU. Fantastic, Kevin. You give a lot of keynotes. I'm sure the topics are somewhat similar, but they vary. What do you like to talk about? What's your ideal message in a keynote?
Well, certainly now it's things about being flexible leadership.
I knew
But
that.
one of the things I really love talking about is change, and recognizing that I believe at some level there's no such thing as organizational change. There's only individual change, and that every person chooses to say I'm in or I'm not. And what effective organizational change happens when more people are saying I'm in and not just saying, well, I still want a paycheck, so I'll go along. In other words, that moving toward commitment rather than solely compliance.
What advice would you give an emerging leader today, Kevin?
Well, if you haven't been promoted yet, here's my advice. My advice is to start looking at the world through the lens of leadership, both through leaders that you see and you like what they're doing, so you can think about emulating them, maybe asking them questions, as well as leaders that you see doing things that you don't love and you want to make sure you don't emulate. So if you're not in the role yet, look at the world through a leadership lens. If you've been promoted, the first thing I want you to do, if you've literally just been promoted, the first thing I want you to do is go on a listening tour. I want you to talk to everybody on the team. I want you to let them know that I want to have a 30-minute conversation, a 45-minute conversation with all of you. I want to get to know you. I want to find out from you what you want me to know, what you would do if you'd been put in my spot, like what you see the biggest challenges that we have are, what you see as the biggest opportunities we have are. I want all that information. Because if I can get all of that before we do anything else, what does it do? It gives me a tremendous amount of new perspective. It shows me to be humble, and it builds trust. And if I can do those three things before I start making decisions and doing and making changes, I'm in a way better position to be successful. And so is the whole team.
Kevin, this has been great. Thank you.
I enjoyed it a great deal, and I hope that everyone else did. And I'd like to give everybody a gift if I can. Obviously, people can go find Flexible Leadership wherever you buy books, but I would like you to go to kevineikenberry.com/gift. If you go to kevineikenberry.com/gift, I will give you our remarkable masterclass on building your confidence and the confidence of others. We'll give it to you for free. There'll be some information there about the book as well, but I just want to give that to you wherever you are on your leadership journey. Confidence is an important part of our ability to continue to get better. And I'd love to share that with all of you just for having watched and listened to us.
That's tremendous. That's very gracious. I love it, Kevin. Thank you. And I'm going to go get it myself. How about that?
There you go.
Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
And we thank Kevin very much for being on the show. How awesome is that? You get a gift. Go to the show notes, and there you'll have it. Kevin Eikenberry, we appreciate it very much for giving us all that gift. Now listen, everybody. The takeaway that I have from today's podcast is this: the listening tour. You knew I would go there, because how great is that Kevin said, hey, here's the advice. As you start a job or you get into a leadership role or anything that is new to you, go on a listening tour. What does that do? Two things, Kevin said: builds trust, and it shows your humility. And he also said, ask questions. And when people talk to you and you're learning your new company or position, listen to them. Ask questions, listen, and repeat. And you know what that shows? That shows vulnerability, not in I'm weak or hey, this or that, but vulnerability as a strength. Everyone knows you're new. You know you're new. So what are you going to do? You can't know everything. You haven't been there. So Kevin's advice is outstanding. And I appreciate Kevin being on the show. I appreciate you being part of it each and every week. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week. If you recommend, like the podcast, or write a review, you know we appreciate it. Take care. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.